Hi everyone, good evening and welcome to an evening with Where the Arts Belong artists. I'm Marianne McQuay, Head of Programme, and in a minute I'll introduce my co-host Tabitha Moses, who's the project facilitator for Where the Arts Belong.
Hi, thanks Marianne.
Thank you. And you're zooming from your studio, aren't you, at the moment? That's where you are.
I am, yes, in Liverpool.
Fantastic. Yes, I'm at home in Liverpool. Some of our speakers are also in Liverpool and some are further afield, but they'll let us know where they are. Where the Arts Belong is an ongoing project with leading visual artists, writers, storytellers, dancers, musicians, composers who've worked creatively with people living with dementia on a wide range of artistic activities. Everyone is incredibly experienced as being a collaborator or a performer or facilitator, but it's the first time everyone, I believe, has worked in a dementia setting. And they were helped on this journey with Tabitha as their project facilitator. Tabitha's going to talk about a little bit, just to set the scene, about when the project started, but I'm just going to ask Sam to put up some images of the exhibition that we've got on at the moment that is some of the works and the outcomes from Where the Arts Belong. See if that might pop up in a minute. Fantastic. So this show is on at the moment in Gallery 4, Where the Arts Belong, Making Sense of It All, a title from one of the artists in the show. And it charts all of the processes that we've mentioned. But I'm just going to ask Tabitha if she wouldn't mind, because she's been involved right from the start of this project, to just say when it started, who the partner was, and just a little bit about its phases, and then we'll go straight to the artists after this. So I'll just hand over to you, Tabitha.
Yourself. Thanks, Marianne. So I'll try and keep it succinct because it's been quite a wide-ranging project which started in 2018. And Blue Coat and Belong, Blue Coat partnered with Belong, who are a dementia care provider, because the values really chimed with each other. Belong provide really quite groundbreaking person-centered care. And so they've been great partners, they still are. So we started actually in 2019 with a pilot residency project in Crewe, Belong Care Village. And just briefly to give you an overview, we then worked with some people with dementia in the Atkinson Gallery in Southport with a view to working in the Birkdale Belong Village. However, COVID then happened, so all work in person stopped. And then as a response to COVID, we started some remote work with the domiciliary wing or the at-home care wing of Belong in Wigan, Warrington and Atherton, called Where the Arts Belong at Home, which paired an artist with a support worker and a customer in their own home. And then we did some more remote work, which was tackling loneliness in groups of Belong apartment tenants called We Belong Together. That was in 2021, again, remotely, a response to the COVID situation. And then we've been gearing up again now to work in a new Belong Village in Chester. So in the run up to that, we've been holding workshops, arts workshops with the majority of our artists in the Grosvenor Museum in Chester. And then we'll be working in the new Belong Village in Chester this summer and autumn, and we're really looking forward to getting back in person there. And I'll just tell you who the artists were. We've got most of them here tonight. We've got Brigitte Jurak, Roger Hill, Alan Dunn, Mary Prestige, Jonathan Raisin, Francisco Carrasco, Gav Cross. We've got all of you here tonight with such a great broad range of practices. Also working with us, we had Suki Chan and Philip Jack as well, bringing their own practices to it. Okay, I think that's a brief overview.
Thank you. And yeah, like so many projects over the past few years, it's had unexpected extensions and extensions due to COVID, but it became maybe even more kind of relevant as a practice to work with older people. And we should say Belong allows for a really person-centered approach to someone on a dementia journey. So that was why they felt it was relevant for artists to come in, because it was also about people's creativity and their own sense of being themselves in the moment was really important. So thank you. It is a very long running project. We're going to ask all of the artists, and we'll have to pick someone to go first, but to say hi, what their kind of practice is, and also just if they want to, what their relationship to Blue Coat is, because most people have a very long running relationship with Blue Coat. So it's who you are, what you do, and then if you've actually worked with Blue Coat prior to this. And I'm going to go for Brigitte first, Brigitte Durack.
You knew that I had just turned on my microphone. Hello, good evening. My name is Brigitte Durack, and I realized that, help me if I'm wrong, I had an exhibition in the Blue Coat in 1999, some time around then, when I first became a resident in Liverpool. As you can hear from my accent, I come originally from Germany. I'm a sculptor and an installation artist, and sometimes also performance artist. And I do both. I do what I would call standalone sculpture in my studio, and I work on co-authored or participatory projects. Yeah, that's me, done.
That's perfect. And
Can I pass the ball on to the next one along in a sort of gymnastic way, or I just use the pen and I point to Mary?
Hi.
Hi.
Great. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Super. Yeah. So I'm a dance artist, and I work with improvisational forms, not so much stylized dance forms, and the essence of play, which is a part of the process of making material and working with people. And I share a dance studio in the Blue Coat and have done for over 10 years now. And me and my colleagues and peers in this improvisation world, we've had a joint project with the Blue Coat, which finished a few years ago, developing participation and engagement and making work of our own, and developing a new dance program within the Blue Coat. Yeah.
Fantastic. Mary, do you want to select someone next from the cohort?
Jonathan.
Thanks, Mary.
I was going to pick one of the audience, actually. I just saw. Yeah.
Oh, hello. My name's Jonathan Raisin, and by background and training, I'm a musician and composer, but my work has sort of evolved over the years, as things do. Worked quite a lot with theatre, and increasingly as a writer and with sound installation. So kind of moving into a more multidisciplinary areas. And I've done a number of projects that have increasingly involved participation, you know, from early years running community arts workshops to larger projects that have involved a lot of talking to groups of people and finding out about their experiences and making work from that, whether it be musical or something based on their practices. So that's me in a nutshell. I came to Liverpool in 1988, having completed my student days, and I think I did my first bit of work at the Blue Coat not long after. Made a couple of shows back in the day, as they say, in the early 90s, in the old Blue Coat concert hall that's now a restaurant. And on and off, sort of various things, a few gigs, a few workshop-based projects there. And I think I did one of the first shows in the new space when it opened, which is now a long time ago, but seems like yesterday to me. So yeah, I have a long history with the Blue Coat. As long as my time in Liverpool, it's always been a kind of home from home, or somewhere that the the artistic centre that I sort of felt most reflects my own thoughts and practices.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jonathan. You can pass the baton on to one of the artists.
Well, I don't know how your screen is, but Alan's just below me.
Okay, great, thanks. My name's Alan Dunn. I'm still describe myself as a visual artist, although increasingly working with sound over the past 10, 15 years. I think I lost a little bit of faith in what an image could do, so I sort of met some people and been working with sound recently. First worked with the Blue Coat 1996, I think, a year after moving to Liverpool, and was involved in one of the very early engagement programs, Blue Coat Connect. And I think it's really important. Blue Coat have offered incredible critical support to me as an artist over the past sort of 25 years. In a nutshell, I'm really interested in, I've worked with pensioners groups since the early 90s. I worked on a project called Tenant Spin. In fact, I'm really interested that kind of creativity can actually start when you get to 60 or 70 and sort of changing that curve of creativity. So this project appealed to me, and that was one of the main reasons. And that's it. I'll pass over to Roger.
Thanks, Alan. I've had a lot to do with the Blue Coat over probably about 4 decades now. I've been on things like the programming committee in the day, and I contributed a chapter to the recent Blue Coat 300 book. So I've had miscellaneous things, but I've premiered a lot of my performance shows in the Blue Coat. I've been an associate artist, and as well as this project, which I'm enjoying greatly, I've also I'm on it regularly for quite a few years now. I've been teaching parents how to read books with babies and run the storytelling group. So I had a lot of that. And it was as a storyteller that I came to the Belong project, but it soon opened out. And I would say now, if I look back on the last 2 years, what has preoccupied me is the relationship between objects and memory. And a lot of the things you'll see in the exhibition, for example, are about work we've done with everything from cards to parts of the museum collections, and how that has been used to bring out people's ability to, yes, tell their story, but also I think it's something to do with keeping in touch with the present. And that for me is the thing about dementia, is it is a technique for keeping in touch with the present. And that has preoccupied me and fascinated me thoroughly for the last while, and will continue through the residencies to come.
That's wonderful, Roger. Yeah.
Who's left?
Thank you.
Who's
Choose
left?
Francisco and Gab.
Francisco.
Gavin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Hello. I'm my creative practice. I'm a Chilean-born, I would say, cultural activist. My background is music, composition, and then very much carnival, and then onto creating large-scale pieces. My first work with the Blue Coat was probably when I convinced Jane Casey to let me work with Keith Kahn when he came, late 80s, I think it was, when he came and did a show about hair, long time ago. And then I went in and out of working in different guises with the Blue Coat for a long time as part of a project that was about poetry and spoken word, working with people like Levi Tafari, Dina Shali Raja, people like that. And that went on for quite a while, and also developing different kind of programs and projects. Then when I came back from South Africa in '95, I was commissioned by the Blue Coat and the Black Arts Alliance to create a multidisciplinary piece. It's like a installation with voice and music and all kinds of things about my journey in South Africa. And then I went on to run the Merseyside International Street Festival, which I plunked firmly in the Blue Coat for launches. So every year we would launch and develop projects and bring artists. So for me, the Blue Coat is kind of home from home in lots of different ways. When I did my first creative practice project for the new Blue Coat there, I did the premiere in the Blue Coat. I can't remember when. I think that was 2013, 14, something like that. So yeah, and I was really pleased be asked to be involved in this project, because dementia for me is something quite personal, that I have to work with a number of very close friends and family who've been through that. So I have learned incredible amounts around not just getting involved in the in-depth kind of reading and but also in the relationship with both artists and participants and members of the families of those who are afflicted with dementia. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll discuss that kind of fully rounded journey as we go. Would you, let's bring in Gav Cross, who by no means, or at least is last on our list. Come in, Gav.
So I'd like to pass it to Gav.
Do that.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Gav. I'm a storyteller currently. And like many people, been on a long journey. My previous background, I've worked in public sector services for people with additional needs. And I've facilitated work in dementia care spaces previously using image and sound. But right now I'm a storyteller, vaguely family friendly. I've performed my shows at Blue Coat and my journey, some delicious projects working with the Blue Room, both in Blue Coat and out in Norton. And I bring chaos and host a alternative comedy club for children and families every month called Funny Looking. There you go.
Which I can personally recommend. But yeah, thank you very much. That's fantastic. And if anyone's just joined us, because of the artists have such amazing practices, but also relationship to Blue Coat, we've just had them all introduce themselves and their practice. And as we go, we normally invite anyone watching at home to drop questions into the chat if you have general questions or very specific questions for everyone. Tabitha and I are going to start off with some questions and then see where we go in the conversation. And a lot of what we want to do is reflect on the learning for practice, but also for dementia care with the project. But I just wanted to ask everyone first what your expectations were coming into the Belong setting. I know people have also had different experiences. Some people have had a long experience, some people are yet to go into the care home, but they're working in a museum. Some people had side projects with this, but what the expectations were, that how your practice was going to meet someone on a dementia journey. If I can ask that to anyone who wants to start us off. Or I can select someone.
I don't mind starting rambling and others can join in. That's a good question to start with, because I was just thinking about one of the strengths of this is we've met as artists kind of away from the formal work, and that's been really useful to support each other and asking those questions. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? And then personally, I think we did the pilot and crew, and we're struggling a little bit because we're all going at different times, and we're trying to get to know Belong, trying to find languages that we can speak to each other with, and all those. I think there's this kind of pattern of slight apprehension to start with on both sides, and then there's kind of curiosity. Oh, that looks interesting. And then there's kind of participation, and then there's almost advocacy. I think in my experience, you've got to go through all those four. So my expectations were apprehension to start with. It's going to sound odd, but I think COVID coming along for me was a kind of breakthrough moment. It started to make sense, ironically. From going on beach walks with Roger when we couldn't meet up otherwise, and reflecting on this and actually taking time as artists to reflect on it. But then really getting to know the staff at Belong, that was not my expectation. My expectation was a little bit more working with people on dementia and learning about the condition maybe more. But I've actually learned a lot more about how you deal and work with people with dementia. Maybe that's, I don't know who would echo this or contrast that, but that was a shift in my kind of expectation, I think. Thank you so much. Anyone else happy to share their sort of expectations of how it might be versus how things kind of went? Brigitte, did you?
Yeah, I suppose it's been, I'm sorry if I'm the cliche, it's been a really steep learning curve for everybody involved, because I think, you know, artist residencies come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I mean, from the weekly to the monthly to the year long, and you know, from the most kind of remote island in the northern hemisphere to kind of, you know, an urban slum in Rio de Janeiro. So I think the sort of, you know, so I suppose there was a kind of a kind of difficulty to communicate at the beginning what is actually meant by an artist residency. And, you know, even the 8 artists which are involved in the project along the way probably have different ideas of what an artist residency is, and how many people in an organization need to know the artist resident has arrived. You know, and how do you facilitate when time is always at, you know, as a premium for the care workers as much as for the artists? How do you facilitate these encounters? So I think it was very good to, you know, to have an art awareness session quite at the beginning. It would have been even better if almost, you know, probably everyone could have joined who was working in an institution, or, you know, from the cook to the manager and everybody in between. And then there is, so kind of, I think that was probably at the beginning a little bit, or that's sort of something where, you know, especially for, you know, when we work in our professional bubbles, like in the art bubble, you just sometimes forget that actually people don't really know what an artist residency is. And it's not nobody's fault that they don't know. I mean, even my students don't know what it is. It's just sort of this weird thing around it. In terms of dementia setting, I mean, I once lived, funny enough, I had a residency in the Netherlands years and years ago, and passed by a very fancy care home. They had on the ground floor workshops for weaving and pottery and a cafe, and, you know, all these sort of, you know, facilities which belong as kind of sort of trying to bring in. So I think it's been, for me as an artist, a learning curve to make ceramic sculptures in the dining room or the living room or the domestic setting. Kind of it shifted. And I do remember a moment in Crewe where I was in the apartment block, and, you know, food was prepared in one corner, and on another table we were just sitting making these clay cabbage leaf clay imprints. So there were very beautiful moments, but that was sort of a real kind of, you know, shift from, you know, like kind of have a workshop, you know, workshop kind of thingy, and then actually sort of doing it in your lounge.
No, it's true, because you weren't necessarily in a studio in the care homes, where you were sort of, it depends where your setting was.
Yes, and then it involves, you know, it is kind of, if you work with messy materials, then of course, you know, I mean, this is, you asked about learning, then you do have to kind of, you know, bear in mind that it needs tidying up or preparing and things like this. And you know, it might not be, you know, I don't know who's in the audience, but if people from the care sector are in the audience, this is sort of just a really practical little kind of thing to bear in mind.
Can I add something in there?
Please do, Roger.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think there's been a lot of areas of learning. I think we all set out thinking that we would learn a great deal from it. Probably we didn't realize in some cases how much we had to learn from it. I've learned a huge amount about dementia as a condition, if we'll call it that for the moment, a condition of existence. But if I look back on the last 2.5 years, and it is about that now, seems to be the one thing that really did happen was it was a journey into care. Because actually this is a Belong project. We get the word Belong from the name of the company that runs the villages that we have been working in. Apart from the concept of belonging, it is essentially about going into places where people are housed, homed and cared for. And I think the dovetailing of arts work with care work and how to do that well is actually the thing that we will probably at the end of the day, at the end of the project, be most notable for having opened up. I think that's the thing we most need to report on, because the dovetailing of creative activity and care is the burden that we're going to be carrying on for probably the next decade and probably more amongst families, care homes, hospital, medical situations and just our personal existence in society. So that was a big learn for me. And the other thing, of course, is with the residencies, until you've been there long enough to understand how everything works, you don't feel quite comfortable about putting your feet on the ground firmly. And so it did take a while, I think, for all of us to put the best foot forward and say, as I think we all are going to do now with the residencies, and say, I know what I want to do and I want to do it this way. And that's a research thing.
No, absolutely. And I think as the project keeps evolving, that the sharing of the research will keep evolving too. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, which I'm going to get to soon, but we'll go to Francisco first. And then I had a genre question, but we'll go to you.
Yeah, I'll just be quick, because, you know, one of the things that I have gotten a lot from is actually listening to the likes of Brigitte or Alan or Mary or Roger, etc., talking about these residencies and talking about going into the homes, because myself, I never went into any of them. And when they talk about my arts awareness session was actually a tech awareness session. We didn't really do any art awareness because it was all about trying to get them to be able to record stuff, because it was all on Zoom. And then I went into the Grosvenor. But in relation to that, it was quite an interesting. I do feel in a lot of ways like I've been on the periphery, and I've not had that kind of relationship and development. And one of the expectations that I came in with was, from my point of view, and was very much about what was the relationship in a different cultural context to what different ways in which dementia is looked at, worked with, developed, connected, how it connects to different families in relation to different cultures. So for me, I'm still out there. I'm not quite sure yet where that's at. And with regards to, I mean, I really had a really interesting and openness kind of time at the Grosvenor. It was really, even though there was only a few people who would be classed as having the condition dementia, because it was also primarily about the families. And I think that's one of the things that really stuck on me, because it's how that relationship connects, and how do you work with not just the person with the condition, but also the person or people who live within that context, and how you relate, you connect the two. So you know, I'm kind of at a place where it's kind of looking at how to move forward from my point of view in that kind of relationship of doing that work and doing that work, because I'm interested not just in working with the dementia, people with dementia, but also with the people that are part of their lives, so that they get something, and also that they can get tools that they can ensure what Roger was talking about, which is about, you know, learning to be in the present.
No, absolutely. Otherwise, people are going off for kind of a leaflet or a website or a possible consultation with the doctor. And yeah, it's the how you embed in families or society that there's still a productive and fruitful life to be had, and how to support people who support them. I'm just going to ask a couple of, like, we'll call it a genre question, to Mary, Jonathan and Gav, and then I think Tabitha might have a question, and then we'll do some questions for the chat. But I just wondered, within Mary, your art form of dance, Jonathan with composition, and Gav with storytelling, where within your art form you had to adapt to work with people with dementia, or where actually your art form was really productive in itself, so where it was possible to be playful. But I just go ask Mary first, if that's possible, and then Jonathan, and then Gav.
Great. Am I on? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I felt it, well, lots of things came up really about in this process, and it was interesting. I felt like I needed to give even more space and more time actually give over to the people who I was working with, and not sort of introducing to. I mean, it was shifting the boundaries of the space to work with people, and I felt and giving people a lot more space to come forward with things. And it set me on, you know, it made me, you know, there was so much there, and it's like you open the space, you give more time, and then you see a lot more potential. And so my role shifted. I felt I had to take a different role sideways, and how I offered things, and then allowed things to develop and give that time for development. And in a way it was, you know, related to my own practice of dance making and working in composition and improvisation, that actually, yeah, the framework is, if I provide the right framework, then so much can come forward. And it wasn't about damping down or anything. I just felt the richness of it, and that's what I'm interested in my practice. And I felt the things were just beginning from the one-to-one in Belong at Home. We had a few workshopy type sessions in Crew. And then the one-to-one, you know, was, one could see much more the individual development, and everybody was absolutely vastly different. And I think one of the things I was talking to Tabitha the other day about how, you know, issues and perceptions about identity, and not to be, you know, as an older person, I feel I get put in a box. As a person with certain disabilities, you're put in a box. People with dementia put in a box. And it's like, well, let's try and disperse some of those things. And yeah, so it's looking at what people have, and yeah, I'm not articulating this very clearly.
Well, your practice values the gesture of the everyday and the gesture of people, and so that's still valuing that within a dementia setting. It's within people's ability to move and play.
Absolutely,
is a value. So,
you know, minimal is fine. It's your sensory awareness to that. It's what you bring to that, and providing the space to allow that to emerge. And that's what is the tuning or the refining of this work for me. Is that really?
Thank you. I'm just going to go to Jonathan next, just talking about kind of composition, or how you might compose, and how that's played out.
Okay, well, I probably should begin by saying that I'm, like Francisco, someone who hasn't done a residency in a care home yet. I will be working in Chester Belong in the autumn. But so my involvement, which in a way could be kind of like a microcosm of what I might do on a longer scale, is were two workshops in the Grosvenor Museum in Chester with a small group of 3 people with dementia, and they're 2 with a partner, 1 with a son. So 3 kind of family groups. And I mean, I should say, although my kind of background is music and composition, I was never quite clear myself that the work that I could most usefully do would be sort of purely about, you know, working with music. But anyway, after a number of thoughts about how I might run these sessions, I kind of thought, well, I'd be quite interested in making a sound piece and exploring a kind of wider idea with people about, you know, how you make something that uses sounds and words, you know, found sound. So we were using objects in the museum because that was the nature of the work, which was very interesting. And I found the radiogram in their storeroom, which we then used in the Bluecoat exhibition. Kind of, the idea came from that work, but is actually unconnected because that was a separate project with Roger. Anyway, so I had the sort of conceit that we would kind of look at how we might, for fun, make a little radio piece or a podcast in a way, but you know, with a 1950s radiogram. And I also had a display case which the museum had of butterflies. So there was kind of, I brought a number of sounds to the party, you know, butterfly sounds, bird songs, flight sounds. Yeah, and because with that kind of, in that context, I'm much more interested in talking about ideas and then kind of working out how we might make something that's audio, that's sonic from that. And that certainly includes words and ideas as well as sound, because I think, I mean, to me, that's interesting. It's where I am at the moment. Anyway, so as a sort of snapshot of how that works in practice, and maybe that reflects an interesting process in a dementia setting. We began with this and people were interested, and I played them some sounds and they sort of, that was lovely. And I played them sort of the combination of music and bird song and music and voices chattering. And we spoke a little bit about, you know, what butterflies make people think of. And we kind of generated a sort of some words. And my thought was that, you know, within an hour and a half session, I can record some of these words. We can fly them all in. I had a sort of sound processing system ready to go. And we sort of did a bit of that, but actually it kind of just went off on a complete tangent. And by the end of this first session, everyone was making paper airplanes and then butterflies, and we were hanging them up. And then as a sort of slight aside in that first sort of hour and a half session, we generated a list of words that had come up. You know, we were having conversations about dreams of flying and whether flying was scary or uplifting, you know. And this was you know, then another thing, which is an aside, but maybe we could come back to, is that the Grosvenor sessions were, to me, benefited greatly by having a team of people working. So effectively you could work one-to-one at any given point. And yeah, we generated a, you know, set of words and thoughts and ideas about flying, butterflies, airplanes, and we made paper airplanes. And then that was the end of the session. And I was very happy about it. And it felt like I was only going to do one more session in that particular block of work. But at the same time, if it had been an extended project, I thought, okay, that's opened up possibilities. We haven't done anything to do with sound in practice yet, but I know what we could do with it. And then in the second session, we did actually, we recorded some speaking, but in a way, what was most interesting to me, because it was the most exciting to the participants, as far as I could tell, was the fact that we were talking. And I think I understand that in certain with certain people with dementia, that's not always necessarily the most useful way in. With this particular group, it was, and we were participating in something very simple and playful. So in a way, Marianne, sorry, it's not really helped about composition and music, but I think what that tells me is that an interesting approach in a more extended project is to work with sound and layering and bringing in as many different ideas and possible sound sources as possible. So I know Alan has done some of this work, you know, about field recording, but I would also, you know, spend time making sounds with people. You know, I would get into making vocal sounds. I'm not particularly interested in teaching people to play instruments because it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and I think that you get the sense of play and poetics and dreaming and being in the moment. And almost everyone has said on the project that although there's a lot you can do with dementia around nostalgia or the past, it feels like very much about creativity in the moment. So it sounds like a beautiful.
It is, and but I'm also, you know, I was very aware that having kind of been cautious about, you know, doing work that leading conversations that dwelt on the past and directly on memory, memories come up, and a kind of almost like, you know, there are rifts that appear, and in this particular limited experience with these small group of people, it's as if there are key memories which are there and therefore should be respected, acknowledged, and used in the sort of work we might be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Gav, I wanted to ask you how much with storytelling, or how much storytelling depends on memory or pattern or improvisation, and how you adapt if you're working in a setting where memory itself is perhaps an issue, or loneliness being on your own, because yours was a sort of part of that set of the project.
Yeah, and I'm trying to address Grace's question as well. So my project, basically, I was using a Facebook portal. I was projected giant size in the room, and this was the first time the group had come together. It was about addressing loneliness. I could see them in their seats, and they could see me wall size. What a treat. And working in partnership with Betty, who was a facilitator, what we said was, right, we're going to go in with a very, pun intended, open book. All the sessions were planned, rough planned, and I had them in front of me, and I was able to jump back and forward and draw out. So the aspiration with the storytelling was to both tell and listen and make and share. So I was lucky enough to watch one of Alan's sessions and how he started, and so we came up with a series of activities, very simple activities to begin with, around different themes. I'm a storyteller for families, really, but so we talked about stories that were important to us when we were young. And one of the first interruptions I had, which was a brilliant interruption, was from somebody who says, "Oh, we will not know any of your references because we're German." And I said, "Well, that's okay. We're going to take Bavarian Grimm stories and maybe a bit of Struwwelpeter." And suddenly I was in with them. Suddenly, as soon as I mentioned stories from their own childhood and those memories, and then they mentioned some stories from their childhood, some particular books, and I think Betty went away and found those, so we projected those large size, and one of them was a particular cover they remembered as well, so they were able to share and to stimulate that. I threw exercises, so one word storytelling and what we learned, and then we moved on to one sentence storytelling. As what we learned was, because we had a projector there, Betty was able to type the sentence. So my short-term memory is terrible, let alone a long-term one. So they were able to see and read back. And one of our aspirations was to speak together, and to make stories together. So I used story dice. They had story dice there, and they had notebooks. And there was just this delightful connection. I was finding my way. It was about loneliness as well. There was an expectation that they wanted to be performed to. So if we looked at different genres, I would read them something, and we checked in with the staff, and the staff said they were very much enjoying it. And it was absolutely delightful. The feedback we were getting was there always became a kind of relationship, which was, "Oh, we haven't done our homework for Gav. Do you think he'll tell us off?" But that became part of the relationship. And we ended up with stories written, stories told, stories shared from within the room. But it was, the big benefit there was keeping a dialogue going with the staff who were there, and picking up from them what they were enjoying. And it definitely challenged me, because I was working with people who had far more experience than me, even in storytelling or writing. So it was about able to pick at those and turn them into something that was shared, and I was able to offer a bit of a structure for them. And we laughed. There was a lot of laughter, which was great fun as well.
No, absolutely, and not a quality or aspect that you think of in those settings. So no, it's really beautiful. I would say I do know that you can deal with any kind of heckler as well, from having seen you perform.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Tabitha's so we're getting lots of questions coming in the chat. I think Sam's going to unpin us, and Tabitha's going to ask some of the questions that are coming in, because she's been reading that while we've been talking. So I'm going to put my mic on.
Can I pick up on some of the questions? I mean, I mean, you know, there was early on a question, you know, what have we learned from dementia, or, you know, from working with people with dementia, which have a form of dementia. I think it's a huge spectrum, and there are lots and lots of kind of, you know, as many as there are people, there are different expressions of the condition, so to speak. So I can only speak from my perspective as working with clay, and I'll make it really short. So their really tangible outcomes include just fine motoric, using the hands, actually playing with mud. You know, if you are in a slightly overheated care environment, playing with mud is not on your agenda normally. So the first encounter is that physical encounter, is actually the shrieking that the clay is cold or stiff or too hard to work. So it's actually something there which resists, you know, there is all of a sudden it's got like a living element to it. I brought in seafood to model from. So again, the sort of real sensory heightening of experiences. Like with Mary and I were probably the least verbal practitioners in terms of trying to solicit people making sentences. I mean, I quite like working in silence. So it's actually, last week on Monday, one lady who was in the workshop, she's like, the concentration was palpable. I mean, just the concentration of thinking through your hands and making this form. And then the last thing, and I think it's got something to do with everyone, including the helpers and facilitators, is I keep saying, embrace the wonky, embrace the rustique. You know, don't be interested in making something which looks like something you can buy in John Lewis's or in the pound shop. I mean, you know, the ability to make something is inert. We have it. We have it as a kid. We make sandcastles, and we have it at 80 or 90. So I kind of, you know, I think when you give the permission to be wonky and rustique, it's an incredibly empowering experience you have, both the facilitators as the participants.
I jump in on one of the questions.
Yeah, no, we'll go for
it. Sorry, but both Grace and Alison have asked a question, to which there's a generic answer. They want more, and we were on a hiding to nothing with this session anyway, because there's a lot of us with a lot of instances to give. But we are going to be producing publication, and we are going to be running a symposium later on in the year, both of which will answer your question about specific instances. There will be things we've done in detail, how to do them and how to follow on our example. But also there will be a much more rounded reflection as we come to the end of our residencies on what's been going on. So even if you don't hear lots and lots of useful tidbits about how we worked now, the Blue Coat with the Belong project is going to offer those up to you as an available thing.
Lovely, thank you, Roger. That's great to say, because you're right. There'll be a much broader reflection at the end of the project early next year. And some of the questions I was going to pick up on were answered by you, Brigitte, which is, I noticed in the chat quite a lot of interest in what you literally did in the sessions with the people, the participants and the staff, the families, the people who are living with dementia. And I'm interested also in how that ties in with the concept of the ownership over the work. And one of the words we've been using is co-creation, co-creating the work. And so this has an extra layer when you bring in dementia, where someone's capacity to know how they're being involved in this creation and what it means for the future is impaired or variable. So I think it might be interesting to ask that question of Alan and Brigitte and Roger and Francisco, maybe just to talk a little bit about that. Maybe tell us a bit about what you did. Brigitte, you gave us a great idea there of what you did, and then how that ties in with ownership.
I could step in. So I was doing getting into doing sound recordings with people, including members of staff and family, and we learned a lot around permissions and also associations. So if you take, especially with sound, so some families would say we're okay to use sound in social media, but not in an artwork. But so there's a process of learning where we say actually the sound is the artwork and social media is silent. So I think that was a really good kind of I learned a lot about permission, but also association. There was an instance where one thing was fine, but then if that work was shown next to another piece that the family were not happy with, how far do you go with association also on work that you've got permission on? So it is a very complex idea. I do think if there's a solution, it's to work with Belong, and we work with Belong really closely. It wasn't us presenting the way the art world works. It was a conversation all the time with Belong. And I think especially go back to doing sound recording, especially during COVID was a real leveler, because it was just nothing made sense, and we were suffering in isolation, and we were, there was grief, etc., etc. So to go in and record sounds with in care homes during COVID was a complete revelation for me. It fundamentally changed who I was as an artist, because we're not just here to deliver. And the staff witnesses, I became a different artist during those sessions. I had to do such different things to make it work. And the staff became different people, because early on, Roger had the idea of, if we're undertaking dementia awareness training at the start, Belong staff should undertake arts awareness training, a crash course in contemporary art. So it's all about this kind of leveling and conversation. And I think permissions, and that's just one part of it that we're kind of learning. But I definitely think the working to embed contemporary art in the future of Belong Villages, that was a big aim with this project, I think, to make art almost like a kind of aroma, or it's a fundamental part of any new build or care home. And Roger went as far to say, well, actually, we shouldn't discuss villages, we should discuss cities. It's a societal issue. It's the whole of Manchester or Liverpool or Leeds we should be discussing in relation to dementia. So I think Belong staff that I worked with were really open to these kind of conversations, which was great. And then we took some of those sound recordings, and we discovered, as well as, I've caught myself saying people with dementia, but for me it was Pegeen, it was Mary, it was Anne, and they had names. So Mary in Wigan, on Crewe, sorry, is the best tongue twister performer possibly in Britain. We found a skill that she kept asking for harder and harder tongue twisters as a kind of sonic instrument, and she kept handling it, and she became this kind of legendary status. And that's something we learned from Tenet Spin, that people have kind of talent, that our work, it breaks the ground a lot, it challenges people. We're not there to just be nice all the time, it challenges people. And the staff said it revealed things about Mary that they can then work with daily and going forward, a talent of the kind of here and now. So for me, that was really rewarding.
Yeah, maybe practical. I mean, thank you, Alan. That was quite a practical kind of thing also about this sort of taxing issue of who owns the artwork, who makes the artwork, and are we really are we allowed to be that inclusive to give first and second names of those who participated? So that sort of, there was a layer in relation to that. And when I had to decide on how the label in the current exhibition should be read or written, I think it cleared it a little bit. So I kind of call myself as the person who's developed the concept and printed the photos. But the actual artworks were made by the people who were putting their fingers in the clay, and that was not me. So I think co-authoring is probably not even the right word, because beyond preparing the ground and having the concept and maybe the sort of the phase that something good will come of it, the actual shape, the finding of the shape is in the hands of those who are shaping the clay. So and there is an ethical dimension to that, and it goes beyond today's session, which I think needs to be teased out much more within the participatory art or socially engaged art. It's not good enough to just say with 10 participants or something like that on a label, or work with 50 ladies in Tate and not mention a single one by name, just say thank you very much for the 50 ladies who worked with me. So I think there is an issue around that, which is like, and somebody called Daniel just asked about people who are not using language as in words and speaking anymore. I had one session with an individual where I just had this Play-Doh and we were just rolling it and pushing it onto a plate. I mean, not on a plate, on a piece of wood. And that was great as well.
Yes,
But that was a one-to-one session, and you know, kind of something may have happened. I don't know, but something was there. Some kind of engagement, some possibly some joy in just touching something, some soft material, and squeezing it. I'm not an expert on that.
No.
Thanks, Brigitte. Roger, were you going to say?
I was going to pick up on that. I mean, over the middle period of that thing, I came across a list I've got here, which was called Progression Through Interaction. And it was actually trying to, for anybody who works with somebody who is on the dementia journey, it's working out what level they're at and what level you might want to encourage them to be achieving at any given time. And if there's a lack of language, if there's a difficulty with understanding, that doesn't mean that there isn't something there that can actually be developed and improved on, if you want to put it that way. Because the one strange thing that we all came into this with was that dementia can only get worse. It might plateau, which is the nearest thing to saying it will stay as bad as it is, but it is the way it is. It is not going to get any better, was the idea. And I, to a certain extent, wanted to challenge that. And in fact, some of the great people who've worked in dementia, people like Tom Kitwood, have equally kind of challenged the idea that you can't actually take people up a level rather than let them slide down a level in this. And to do that, you actually have to have very precise and very calibrated ways of engaging with people at the first level they're at and then taking it further. And that was the instinct I got from this, which was that we will in the future very much need to start thinking about how we judge the people we see. Because I don't think I did any co-creation. I think all I did was I shared a lot of really rather brilliant moments with people, and they were gone, and they are gone, and they went into the forgettery, and neither they nor I will hold them for long. But I do think that what we call strategies for sharing brilliant moments is probably the thing that almost everybody, whatever level the dementia at, will need to benefit from.
Thank you, Roger. And that brings us beautifully to Francisco as well, who also shared moments and doesn't have the solid, tangible object that Brigitte's got. I
did. I actually focused very much on percussion and rhythms, but not rhythms of any particular type, just creative rhythms in the moment. I really like and totally agree with what Roger just said. For me, that was the crucial point. When I worked in the Grosvenor, I brought lots of percussion instruments, talked about time. We looked at what time meant. We had different perceptions of it. I was made to play a couple of songs by the participants, and one of the people who with dementia told me several times that he didn't sing, and then sang beautifully. But we created lots of different moments and lots of different environments, musical environments, through different emotions. So using instruments, looking at instruments and how they made them feel, how different sounds made them feel, and how different sounds, how could they express where they were at, what they were feeling, or how they arrived, and what they were thinking when they were coming on the way. And that was quite nice, and it created a really interesting moment. I wanted to just comment back to because Brigitte brought it up, of the person that asked the question about frontotemporal dementia, which is the condition that my very close friend has, and he's a colleague of mine, and I have been kind of working with him in different ways for over 4.5 years now. And that for me has been quite a long journey. He's had to retreat from the worst situation, but that context. And one of the things that has always kept him back is it's quite interesting. If we're playing or doing sound and he's not involved, he becomes very agitated. But if he's part of that, or if he creates, so I have sat with him and played with rhythms, followed their rhythm and created things, and they do kind of bring him back into that moment where we can have that relationship, that very strong relationship. So for me, it's about looking and finding and trying and making loads and loads and loads of mistakes, but in a good way and in a positive way. And as Roger said, finding those moments which disappear, but then because you find them, you know that there are other moments coming along the way.
Oh, that's beautiful, Francisco. Thank you. Yes, and there are other moments coming along the way, but I am aware it's 7:05 now. And this has been, before I hand back to Marianne, this has been a beautiful bite-sized taste of our longer symposium that is going to be coming early next year. So, Marianne.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. It is a snapshot and a brief moment with some of your amazing voices, but we will have the exhibition at Blue Coat continues until the 12th of June. So if you come to Blue Coat, you can see some of the collaborations and the co-creations, and then some of the not co-creations. On the website, there's a film about the show as well. And as Thomas said, it's really not over as a journey. So there will be a book and a symposium, and residencies are continuing. So keep in touch with us if you'd like to see more and more of the artists, more to the point. But thank you so much to everyone, and to also our funders, Arts Council England, the Bearing Foundation, and also our partnership with Belong. We will put this out as a recorded conversation very soon. And thank you all for watching. I wish we could see you all, but hopefully at the symposium we'll see you in person. So thank you so much to the artists, and we'll say good night. Thank you. We'll do a round of applause.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.